Before we even begin exploring the proper way of playing this unit, let's define what does it mean to be frontline and what responsibilities you have as a shield player. If you don't want to, there is a time skip directly to the unit control, but unless your level is like 2k or above, I highly recommend you to stay and listen. Controlling a shield unit makes you the most important piece on the chessboard. Without you, nothing happens, nothing moves, because if they do, everything gets shredded. This also means that your judgment on the upcoming encounter, your timing, as well as being able to look at the whole map rather than just on what's in front of you before engaging, will most likely decide the outcome of this battle, which makes it the most difficult role to fulfill, since you're not only responsible for your unit, but also for everyone else's units behind you. And that naturally requires you to play heavy armor. Generally speaking, there are two types of encounter scenarios from a shield type frontline player perspective. Unit control aside, the offensive scenario consists of many steps and decisions that need to be made in seconds before engaging. For example here, to achieve the best possible result I need to communicate as a shield player, because you will be the first to move and you need everyone else to follow. If you don't have a voice channel, use pings through tab, use chat in all caps, spam mouse wheel pings, use emote markers like request help here, anything to get the attention of your team. This is how you will group your team near you. Press tab and look where everyone is. If you see half of the players not even grouped nowhere near the front lines, you sit tight and wait. Patience is key. There is nothing worse than to go in alone or overextend with a shield unit and lose it since there are so few already. Remember that your job is to lead and cover. If no one is near you, then you wait or choose a different location. Step 2. You need to find out if the location you want to attack is even pushable in the first place. Maybe they have a fire unit, maybe they have war rockets, or anything that applies massive crowd control, which I like to call priority objectives. Press tab and have a look at enemy units. And if they do, then somebody needs to take care of it by diving, using artillery or anything else at their disposal. If not, you need to rethink your approach, perhaps change the engagement area if there is a choice, because if you walk your team on a flamer unit in a choke, your poor judgment just costed 200 units for your team. Unless of course your team has something that applies mass CC as well, in that case the better team wins. But, if possible, it's always better to out-rotate than to trade. Or even better, is to split in two forces and attack from multiple sides like we are engaging here, from the left flank and the center. Because when enemy attention is split, it will be much easier for one side to break through and gain ground to maneuver instead of being with everyone in the same choke point, sharing AoE damage and crowd control effects. A perfect example of this would be the start of any siege when the attackers is rushing on the first siege tower and getting wrecked because there's nothing easier to defend than a singular choke. However, once the attackers start to split and use 2 or more entry points, the defenders need to split their attention, which leads to uneven distribution, and that causes a breakthrough for the attackers. Step 3. When everyone's grouped up, you start slowly moving towards enemies in line formation, which is a great indicator that you're there, you're ready, and you're providing cover to your team. If it's a corner battle, you might want to try and expose your unit slightly in a line formation to allow your ranged dealers to have line of sight. When you are about to reach the enemies, you group your shield with cover commander to concentrate your unit's defenses into a singular point, because what's thin gets broken through. Although, that depends on the shield unit, but let's have Imperial Spear Guard in mind this time. Step 4. When the unit is nice and stacked, you choose which part of the enemy defense formation you need to tank the most and make contact with it. It may be Imperial Pikes a little bit to the left, it might be Halberdiers in the front, or something more to the right. But beware, even though you are the first to engage, you can't run off too deep too fast or you will be focused and eliminated. Once the contact has been made, you provide support to your unit and units around you with your hero depending on the kit of your weapon. If you feel like your side is on the advantage and enemies are being pushed back, you start to push your shields first with X and then put them back on Cover Commander, like it's shown here. This micro is essential so that the unit stays in front of you, because if you are in front of your unit, you will be killed. This type of control prevents you from overextending and provides a higher chance of survival, which results in longer control of the front line. Which finally brings us to the unit control explanation, where later on I will explain the defensive scenario in which you pretty much just cover and tank, since there is way less decisions to make. So, the Imperial Spear Guard. First thing you need to know is that formations for this unit is used pretty much just for covering allied units, mostly from range fire, until enemy melee troops are in range, and blocking the entry to the point after the brawl for it has ended, to prevent further interruptions. But mostly, once the enemies are a step away, we want to group them up in Cover Commander and tank the chosen area of enemy blob. And that is simply because like this, the unit will provide more value in active fighting while become more tanky because of the bonuses that Cover Commander is providing. Like more stats and CC immunity, as well as it applies CC effects to enemy units and heroes, while at the same time providing a buff that makes you take less damage from enemy units. Their trait, Lock Shields, which should technically allow you to stay in formation, unfortunately is only good versus small group of enemies and only for a couple of seconds. The important bonus of that trait is the overall damage reduction from the front, which is 35%. In conclusion, it's working, but is simply inefficient versus bigger blobs and provide minimal value for your team. Secondly, your first ability, which is an advance order, is a very safe way to approach and knock down foes frontally and serves as a direct counter mechanic to brace type skills, and works best when used on pikeman units like halberdiers that deals a lot of damage and are hard to approach safely without taking a beating. So you will want to keep it mostly for those types of units or simply try to mix it in to maintain pressure. Once you are already in melee combat with Kawa Commander, you are met with two choices. First choice is when you realize that your team is slightly winning the encounter at the moment, therefore you want to push through, which in that case you need to have your unit grouped on F2, press X to push it forward, and a second later put them back on Kawa Commander. This micro makes sure that you move forward while being behind your unit. If you just leave them on Cover Commander and move forward yourself, then the unit will follow you from behind, meaning you will be exposing yourself and most likely gonna get killed. Staying behind your unit is of most importance. Second choice is when you start to feel like you're losing the push, which in that case you want to try and hold as much as possible by using the available kit from your hero weapon in order for possible reinforcements to reach you, or simply stay there until the last possible moment and serve as a distraction so that everyone else could get away. Trying to retreat yourself and regroup for a second re-engagement is sometimes an option as well, although that is pretty rare, so good luck. Please do keep in mind that while attacking, or especially when defending, your unit might be splattered around and forcefully spread because of heavy CC mechanics, like unit skills or hero ultimate skills where it says, I quote, sends enemies flying. In that case, you most likely going to want and reform the unit as much as possible, but you need to be quick, because thin defenses gets broken through. In order to do that, you will use your advanced skill, which will attempt to reform your tight formation in front of your hero. However, do not expect a perfect 100% reformation, and by no means just leave the unit on advance until it's perfectly reformed, or it will most likely get obliterated because of the loss of defense effects from Cover Commander that you won't be using in that time frame. Your aim is to quickly use the advance order and go back to Cover Commander in 1 to 1.5 seconds. Any longer than that and you risk heavy losses instead. In this amount of time the unit will reform as much as it can, and from there on you just resume the brawl. Defensive scenario is simple. You cover your allies in a line or block formation from range fire, depending on how wide the area is. Then once the enemies are starting to get closer, you prepare for impact and counter-engage once the enemies are in melee range with whatever kit your shield unit has. Depending on the deployment of the enemy troops, you might want to reposition yourself more to the left or to the right before the enemies reach completely in order to soak things like Imperial Pike Advance, which may come from the side instead of the center. As well as before the contact, it would be great if you poke them with artillery to weaken the impact or simply counterfire their existing artillery. In real battle the defense will look like this. I let my team know about incoming enemies with pings, move towards the engagement area, position my unit in a way that provides cover, and in this case, since I found someone overextending, I quickly engage and start to tank him in order to deny any possible reinforcements that could come if we wait. After that, I quickly regroup with everyone else, use mouse wheel ping to let my allies know of enemy location, position myself to cover my allies, hold in F2 because there are no units with high block break, wait for my allies to group, and counter-engage with advance since I engage pikemen. Then follow up with Cover Commander, and because we are winning I continue with X into Cover Commander micro in order to push the front line further and soak the damage before anyone else. After that I regroup with everyone without chasing to not overextend and prepare for another defensive encounter. Again I try to be the first in order to tank the damage, but because of a mistake my unit gets spread too wide, so I quickly group it up with advance and continue to tank in Cover Commander. Here I am not pushing through because I feel that we're getting overwhelmed, so I hold as much as I can instead for reinforcements to reach us. Well, the attack will look like this. I look where my allies are, I let them know I have a shield unit, I get in position, show them that I am near the front lines and I'm ready to cover, wait for team to group behind me, and had a damage dealer overextend first, so I rush to try and cover for him. Notice a fire unit, which is a priority objective and number 1 threat to our push, so I dive it to minimize any further losses while pushing my unit with X into Cover Commander micro. Now even if I would have died by overextending here, my unit is still on Cover Commander and it would have continued to try and break through until it reaches my body while tanking anything on the way. Now regrouping for a second push and plugging the choke to provide cover from range dealers, and going to support another damage dealer that didn't know it's not the right time yet. Now when everyone is here I simply try to continue support, but because I heard a danger ping I turned left to deal with a flanker since we had a second shield unit in the front. And went straight back to support the front lines afterwards. Now to accelerate your learning process, let me show you what you shouldn't do as well. First, if you need cover from things like grape shots and other minor stuff, don't be afraid to expose your unit in a line formation slightly, which would have saved the trouble here of hugging the artillery with my face. Second, don't waste your advance on tiny amount of troops. Third, if you need to push forward, don't leave your unit on cover commander and simply move by yourself, or you will be killed by artillery, because you're overextending. Use X from F2 formation into cover commander in order to push the unit forward and stay behind it at the same time, which will naturally provide cover. Fourth, don't be that guy with shields like you see here on my right that is AFK on point before the enemies around the point are cleared. You need to make contact and continue to brawl until you push out the enemies outside of the point and then station yourself in front of the point and block it to prevent capture interruptions from enemy units and heroes until you completely rout the enemies. Instead, do this. You clear the point and make a wall in front of it so nobody could come over and interrupt while paying attention to the map. Or chase the enemies up until their second line of defense to gain further value. Now then, Doctrines. As you can see on the right, the idea is to make them as tanky as possible in order to be able to withstand a reasonably good amount of time versus high damage dealers like Reapers, Zweihanders, Men-at-Arms, so that your team can deal with them without needing to trade instead. My middle doctrine with all stats and health is not the best choice, I simply don't have the better option for now. Ideally, you would want one out of these two to replace mine.